Hello, I am so excited, also a little sad, because this episode ends our season 1 podcast as we take a short break and stockpile a bunch of new episodes for you as we start season 2 in a few weeks. I brought in a real closer though for you today. I have with me a legend in the Christian worship community. She is a songwriter. She is a worship artist. She is a mentor to so many people. She is an absolutely incredible woman of faith, woman of God, and you get to hear from her today. She's going to talk about so many things. She talks about what's behind many of her songs. She talks about her childhood. She talks about what she feels when she walks out on a stage. I'm telling you, you are about to get an inside glimpse, or we'll say it this way, a backstage glimpse into the life of the absolutely incredible woman, Rita Springer. Enjoy this episode.
I signed with Capitol Records and...
Okay, so is that why you went to Nashville?
Yeah, it just was easier to do staff writing every day when you're there, and you can just go write songs at different people's houses or your studios.
Right.
And then they wanted the new record.
Okay.
And so we're just...
So are you working on a new one now?
Yeah, so it'll probably release in July or August. But the first single comes out.
Can you tell me anything about it?
Yeah. Oh, totally.
I want to hear everything about it.
Are we recording now?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We're on. We're on. This is so chill. This is just like, right. If it could be a couch, it would, but I don't think that the cameras can get
Yeah. I'm so excited about it.
And then we'll go back because I want to hear your story. I want to hear history, and I want to tell you how I have met you before, which you won't remember. But what's happening with this album?
Well, when I did Battles, it wasn't anything that I ever thought or prepared for.
Really?
I was driving up to Redding, California, maybe in 2014 and 2015.
So, and Battles was until 2017, right?
It wasn't released until 2017.
Okay.
So it was like a couple years before that. I was going to just an artist gathering that they have every other year up there. And while I was on the way up there, the Holy Spirit started talking to me about recording another record. And I mean, I'll be 53 this year. And so I've been in this business a long time. And I'm not the kind of person that tries to pump out something for the necessity of pumping out something.
Yeah. You don't have time
and so I just was like, you know what? I don't really ever have to do another project. And so when the Lord said that to me, I got physically sick and pulled over and almost threw up. And
you were on the drive
on the drive up, yeah. And he said that to me, and I was very aware that something was wrong. And so he just said, let's not talk about what I just asked you to do. Let's talk about why it gave me that reaction. And so that started this long conversation with the Lord of really going back and pulling off the things that happen to you with people and with labels and with all that stuff that are so far from the reason I got into this. And I think it happens to so many of us as artists or whatever we want to call ourselves these days. Yeah. But I didn't get into this for records and for CCLI. And I started singing because God was walking in the room and healing people. So,
and when you started, was there such a thing as
No, there really wasn't. Okay. And honestly, when I look back at how it is I got to come into this whole thing, what a beautiful way to come into it. I mean,
how did that happen?
There wasn't a roadmap for this. I grew up singing hymns. I can remember when the Maranatha, Hosanna, and Integrity books just slid themselves next to the hymn books in the back of our pews. And instead of singing hymn number what and such, we would sing chorus number whatever. But I can physically remember the atmospheric change, singing about the old rugged cross and then flipping to the next song, singing I Exalt Thee. There was a shift in the atmosphere in the room, singing about the Lord as opposed to singing to the Lord. And, you know, as I grew up and matured, I could identify the fact that you actually could get the same feeling. It's the intention of how you sing that song or those lyrics. And so I grew up singing about the Lord.
Yeah, sure.
And until I really started to have deep relationship with the Lord, I could feel the difference in singing on a hill far away, stood an old rugged cross to I exalt thee, I exalt thee. It's a whole different thing. But then when you identify who it is you're actually singing to and have this relationship, you could sing the old rugged cross and the Spirit hit the room. Yeah. It really is about where it lays upon the heart. And so for me, that was my upbringing. So going into the Vineyard, that was my rearing years was John Wimber and the Vineyard. And that church scared the dickens out of me when I first walked in because I wasn't ever exposed to, it kind of was a commune culture, you know, that hippie commune culture of come as you are. And
was that Jesus movement time?
Kind of out of the Jesus movement. It came out of that. It wasn't during that. I think that was more 70s. Okay. But Vineyard kind of popped up with the Keith Green in the early 80s. And then by the time I graduated high school in the late 80s, it was a predominant growing
so
church
you got into this solely for, clearly there was not money on the table like there's now.
Oh my gosh. It wasn't
there was
even,
not. Okay, so can you?
None of that. And it's almost
we're like hitting.
now.
We're like out of the gates on this because I really do want to go back on your whole journey, but it wasn't what it.
No.
Why did?
I mean, that was a different era. That was a fully
why did you go
different
into
era.
it? What was the if?
Honestly, people were getting healed. We were watching. You would open your mouth and sing in those conferences. Vineyard did these worship conferences once a year. At those points.
I went to one back in the day when I was a kid. Kevin Prosh.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Prosh?
Kevin Prosh.
Kevin Prosh.
Yeah.
And I still remember it.
Yeah.
30 years later now.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean,
so things.
Wimber. You know, Wimber started the Vineyard. So Wimber was one of the original Righteous Brothers. Okay. So his whole music was beginnings were secular music. Then he got radically saved and started this movement. And his kids kind of ran the music end of it. So, and it just, I mean, honestly, the conferences were a big draw. And VMG or Vineyard Music Group used to have these subscriptions. So every quarter they would release these albums. And how the Vineyard would do it is because it was a church plant that was now hundreds and thousands of churches, you couldn't write or be a part of the Vineyard unless you couldn't write songs or sing unless you were part of a Vineyard. Okay. You couldn't record anything with them unless you were part of a church or part of a Vineyard church. The moment you left that umbrella, you were Dunskies. Okay. Yeah. So, yes. And he didn't start it to start a record label. He did it to start a movement. I remember the most brilliant thing Wimber ever told us as writers was that our platform basically was that God gives us the sound and we give the church the sound and then the church gives the sound back to God. So it's a constant ever flow of adoration that is a full circle. And I loved that idea. And so I was young enough in it and you'd go to these events and people would raise their hands and prophesy and signs and wonders would come in the midst of this sound. And they were simple sounds. We weren't trying to be hip, cool, or culturally relevant. Right. We were just trying to get the presence of God in the room. So I love that those are my beginnings. And the moment that I'm
guessing that served you very well now.
Yeah. It kept me grounded.
That's what I'm thinking. It
kept me so grounded.
Decades later where it's a totally different world.
Different thing. I mean, as women in the early Vineyard days, you couldn't stand on the platform. You actually had to be BGV off the stage. Really? Yeah. I mean, it was like, we've made some great
real progress.
Headway, but I was one of the, outside of the Langley Vineyard girls back in that day. And Cindy Rethmeyer was a pretty big songwriter in the Anaheim Vineyard. There weren't a lot of us that were noticeable or on the recording. So my first published song, first recording that I ever did was I had written a song for the family I was living with, their daughter, their little girl had a brain tumor, benign brain tumor. And I nannied as in my early 20s, late teens, early 20s. And I would write these songs at night before the parents came home for my nanny jobs. And I wrote this song about healing and prayer.
Do you remember the note
for her?
Title?
Yeah, it was called "Make Us a Prayer." It was a simple. That's the first one. That's the first one that was ever published. First song of mine that was ever published, and the only reason that it was on one of those subscription recordings was because I was going to a church in Seattle that a couple brothers that were big writers for the Vineyard, and the way they ran those subscriptions is. Back then we had side A, side B, cassettes.
I do remember this.
And so you had the Vineyard worship leader from San Luis Obispo doing side A.
Okay.
And then the worship leader from some vineyard in Nevada doing side B. Okay. And so that was your entire release for that quarter. And it would be volume 12 or volume 11, volume 10. And they just called them volumes. So every quarter they would release it. So you got 4 of those a year. And they would go and live record these events. Okay. And that was really the first live recording of worship that began to kind of come out. And they wanted to do that
before there was YouTube Live, before there were Instagram Live, or there was no internet. Live. There was no internet. I remember the cassettes, the Integrity or the Vineyard.
They sold the way they sold when people would fly all the way overseas here, fly all the way from different states to conferences and would buy the product and take them all the way back to the churches. There was no download. There was no internet. There was none
online
of that
stores.
Nope.
How do you think that protected you decades later, looking back, in the sense of purity of heart?
Well, I have peers in that era that lost their marriages, got ruined, all kind of stuff. So I really do think it's an inner settling. Yeah. And, I had a pretty good, solid upbringing, but I just happened to be that kind of personality that I wanted the real thing. And I didn't want it to be mocked up, made up, or lied about. And so I tried to find the center of where Jesus was at all times, and took to heart that, when you read the scripture and you saw that he had balance, even though he could flip tables over, I wanted to find the balance that still had the vigilante part of her in it that was like, we won't settle for this, but this is where your kindness has to show, or this has to show. So I think for me, there was always that integrity of what's right. And, I say this a lot in a lot of the classes that I teach, but I remember when I had the conversation with the Lord after CCLI got big and I was standing around and doing conferences with peers that were making millions and millions of dollars in royalties, and I just never have. And I said to the Lord, what's the deal here? Like, what's the deal here? Could you not trust me with the money? And I remember he said to me, do you want a royalty check or do you want to raise the dead? And I did ask if we could do both.
I love you.
But
is it possible to?
Yeah. Is there realistically, this is my living, but really wanted to find out what it is he meant by that. Not that he couldn't trust me with
absolutely,
but that would my sight line be skewed if that became precedent over this. And it makes me emotional thinking about it. But
oh my goodness.
I mean, I want to see the dead raised. And I don't know that the dead will ever be raised in a royalty check. And so there's so much of that right now.
Yeah.
And so many artists that I mentor that are fighting that whole thing because there's no difference in that outside of comparison or trying to jockey for position on stage or trying to out-sing somebody, or how come they got that position and I didn't get that position. It's the same thing with royalties. Why are they making this and I'm not making this? Why are they? I've had a really difficult life, but I love the teachers that say, if you find somebody that has an anointing and they're not limping, you can't trust them.
You don't trust them. That's right.
So it's like,
never trust anybody.
I'm dragging my left leg across the stage, so you can probably trust me. So anyway.
Oh my goodness. This is amazing. Question, while we're still on this before we go back, was that ever threatened? The purity of, were there moments?
Yeah. And I think that's,
or was there,
like, I think,
did you ever have to say a hard no?
Not really to like, I felt like I lived in a bubble with the Lord. I felt like I constantly lived in this bubble with the Lord where, there'd be people that would say all the right things and you'd be like, oh my gosh, so-and-so wants to like do a tour with me. And oh my gosh, so-and-so, they want to, every time there was a record that or the label wanted to do something, there were always promises made with the labels. And they were like, this is the one, this is going to be the one, and it's going to change your life. And so a lot of people would speak things that didn't ever pan out. And that was probably harder because you had to deal with the Lord on that. Was it something that I did? Was it something I said? Am I not playing the game right? I've been in situations where, big record labels, Christian record labels wanted to sign me, and I won't say the name of these guys, but, I remember walking in once and having this one meeting with like an icon, like the icon of icons, and being like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that this record label wants to sign me and got to make a good impression. And they walked in and looked me from head to toe and wouldn't sign me because I didn't weigh what they wanted me to weigh. And it was devastating. And I weighed less than I have ever weighed in my life at that point. And by no means was overweight if you look at that standard. But it just was like, oh gosh. But I think when you look back on it, as much as it hurts, it was protection from the Lord. But when you're young in the Lord, you don't know that. You have to like weed through all of the, the debris of other people's anxiety, other people's, judgment, other people's rejection of you. And that's why I'm so glad I had that,
But yet it seems from a complete outsider's perspective, God kept raising you to the top.
Yeah,
in the sense of like
completely different sense, like in a keeping me sense.
In the most, and in the most pure sense, in the most true influential sense, somebody who has stayed the course.
Yeah.
Somebody who has, it's just, my goodness.
There have been also I think one of the hardest hurdles for me was relationships. I'm 50, almost 53. My heart's desire was to always be married. And I've always felt like the Lord said I'd be married, filled journals in my teens and 20s with all these words from the Lord and these beautiful volumes of journals in boxes in the garage that have these profound conversations with the Lord about that. But for the Lord never to have brought it. And that was a huge thing for me too, because, a lot of people find their mates on the road. And I remember one woman came up to me kind of in the heart of those traveling years and said, the Lord told me that many men look down and say, that's what I want. But the Lord's got you so protected. And when you're 28, 29, 30, 31, you're like, okay, God, let up a few.
Thank you.
Yeah. But I look back on that and I'm like, oh my gosh, she was so well preserved. But then there was another season where there were just disastrous relationships with just friends who just
not even just romantic relationship, friendships,
just friendships that became.
I think you wrote about this in one of your books that I read years ago.
Horrifying,
extreme betrayals.
So much of that, which that would have taken me out more than anything. So when I look back on those years, and I see how the Lord plucked me out of a pit. I still gasp when I think, oh my gosh, because I'm when you talk about people on the Enneagram, I'm a definite 4.
You are, is that the individualist?
That's the romantic.
My sister is in it. Yes.
And we take everything to heart, but there's part of me that also kind of wants to resort to a 2. And that is, let me help you get out of your slime.
Let me rescue
and let me rescue you. And I think that I had so many people riding on my coattails too. And I was in a season where I wasn't strong enough to say, I can't do this anymore. Until one day I had to say, I can't do this anymore. and suffer the consequences.
Yeah, I was just about to say, I bet you paid for that.
Oh, you paid dearly for it. You paid dearly for following Jesus and doing what the Lord's asked you to. But it's like so much water under the bridge now. And I
really, because I am in the throes of a lot of exactly what you're describing. And so that's great to hear that it can be water under the bridge. One of my friends one time told me that when you are being attacked, assaulted, betrayed, whatever it is, by whoever it is, that you have to still be a Christian.
That's a hard one.
And that's a hard one. She goes, and they're banking on me being a Christian, which means keeping my mouth shut, taking what will, suffering quietly. Yeah. But that doesn't mean that we're not dying inside. Right. How did you walk? I did not expect this to go this way. So this is amazing. I'm like just getting personal therapy. Thank you so much. How do you walk through those? Because I think that's even for just our staff or the different, anybody in life, relationships. And how do you get to a place where it's water under a bridge?
You normally don't. This is what I've found. I don't know if this is psychology based, but I think that we usually attract in our lives the opposite of who we are. For some reason, you can be the kindest person and you will end up getting attacked by the meanest kind of people. But in whatever your personality is, whatever you draw, I am a passion-filled, oil on the feet of Jesus, Mary, with some Martha qualities, but I'm a Mary. Well, I don't really attract Marys. I attract people that would love to be the Marys. And so you become responsible, being like, this is how you come to the feet. Right. This is how you pour the oil out. And most of these kind of people are drawn to you.
Mad at you that you're at the feet already.
Right. But they're drawn to you because you have something they don't have.
Absolutely.
And then if you get in codependent cycles with them, then you start trying to give them what it is you think you need to give them to get them to where they are so that they don't have to actually make the journey themselves. And so the first thing that I had to actually reconcile with the Lord was my part in it.
Okay.
And what was my part in it?
It comes back
and what had the Lord said, stop doing, that I continued to do, that was my sin, that I had to actually own, and I had to kick out of the space that it was taking up in my life, that I did it. Maybe I did it because I had rejection issues. Yeah. Maybe I did it because I had some other kind of issues. Right. But once you start getting that out of the way, all of a sudden those issues that it's resting on become very apparent. So you're no longer really dealing with the individual. You're dealing with why you allowed those individuals in the first place.
Which is the only people we can ever actually deal with is ourselves.
Yeah, because you can blame people all day long.
Oh, all day long. I can give you a big list. Yeah.
You lose the assault of other people when you begin to find favor in what God has said about you. And I'll never forget, I had a really beautiful pastor at that time that said to me, I want you to go listen to R.T. Kendall's talks on forgiveness. And that started the turning for me. And then I had a long conversation with the Lord. And he brought me to the betrayal of Judas in the scripture. And it's written about in those gospels, but I think it's in the Luke gospel, where when Judas comes to Jesus in the garden, Jesus turns to Judas and says, do what you came here for, friend. And he calls him friend. And that was the key for me. And Jesus said, ask me why I can call one who's betrayed me friend. Because that was huge to me. Because let me tell you, I wasn't calling these people my friend.
Yeah.
And I was calling them everything but my friend. And so that really radically started to unravel in me.
Oh my goodness.
And I asked him, I said, why could you call him friend? And he simply said to me, I had ate with him. I had embraced him. I had known him and he'd known me. And I knew in that moment, all that I saw wasn't the man who had sold himself out for a bunch of coins to betray me. I saw a friend that would hang himself in a few short hours and I'd lose him. All I was thinking about was losing him. And that nailed it for me.
Oh,
and I had to start looking.
I'm going to need some Kleenex, Chris, wherever you are. Chris is Kleenex guy, man.
Do you understand what I'm talking about, though?
I very much understand.
It took the power off of what they had done and put the power back on Christ.
On God.
And put the power back
and
on
what he was.
How forgiveness looks through all of that stuff and says, I've lost this. And I could grieve the loss of the beauty of what it could have been, as opposed to being so undone by what it had become. And that changed my world. And I started to heal after that. And there are moments even with individuals, I'd forgotten their names. And somebody would mention them, and I'd forgotten their names, and I had to actually remember their names, almost as if I had to go through a Rolodex to remember their names. And I knew, it's like, oh gosh, God has totally healed me. And I'm not the same person now, because what I used to allow then, I would never allow.
Sure, yeah, because you don't need a second Jesus. Judas only needed one.
No.
You don't right.
I only needed one.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
But anyway, that's like,
I'm genuinely like really impacted by that.
And it's hard to do. It's so hard to do.
It's really hard to do.
But it's powerful when you can get it done. So
man, I receive and I hear that. Oh my goodness. Okay. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, Manny. We should just always have Kleenexes in here, because I'm always okay. So we met going way back. Probably I would have been 22 and I'm 40 now. So what is that? 18 years ago. I was a YWAMer.
Okay.
In
LA? Kona.
In Kona, Hawaii. And I was in a little DTS it wasn't little, but it was one of their smaller ones. It would be small compared to what it is now.
Yeah.
And I was in a DTS in 2002. It must have been 35 or 40 people.
Yeah.
And I'm there as a 22-year-old just figuring out what it's like to give my life to God. And there's a buzz around campus that Rita Springer is coming to.
Were you in that worship school?
No, I wasn't in the worship school.
You weren't in the worship school.
No, because I'll sing one of your songs for you and you'll figure out why I really quit.
Because I know I went there quite a bit to do their
You were
worship
in, that's what you were doing. You were doing their worship school up in those brown buildings. Yep. You remember?
Oh, yeah.
That's where you were. Yeah, the Tippy Top.
Yeah.
And have you been, I don't know if you've been there lately, but now Tippy Top is expanded way up that mountain. But you were in the worship school and they were like, we get Rita Springer for like a Wednesday night. Back then it was a Wednesday night worship. And I was like, who's Rita Springer? Blah, blah. And so you were walking out where those little lunches were. And I'm just like, I'm always been a hungry heart. I always have no shame. I want to meet everybody. I want everybody's wisdom. I'm a learner. I'm a perpetual learner. And everybody's like, there's Rita Springer. And I was like, I'm going to go meet her. Because nobody will go talk.
God, I hope I was so sweet.
You were, are you kidding me? You were the best. I'm like a little like, oh my goodness, hi, I'm Jamie Klein. I was Jamie Klein then. I'm like, I'm Jamie Klein. You were so kind to me. You were so sweet to me. I would just was like, and I'm not a worship leader. I have no pitch. I don't even know what a harmony is.
Yeah.
I don't know what a melody is. Sometimes our girls will say like, let's sing the bridge. And I'm like, what's a bridge? I don't know anything. You were absolutely so sweet to me. And you led worship that night in Kona in that tiny little pavilion that's been torn down now. But you sang Worth It All.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yep. Those were the days.
I carried Worth It All through my outreach to Malaysia, my outreach to Thailand. I've carried Worth It All until this morning. When I was new, I have played Worth It All throughout the next 18 years of my life. And so
I love that.
I want you to know that it reaches. It reaches so far. And those lyrics of what is it in my dark
for Worth It All?
Yeah, Worth It All.
I don't understand your ways.
I don't understand. Yes.
But I'm going to give you my song. I'm going to give you all of my praise.
Yes.
You hold on to all my pain or
and I didn't at that point in life, I didn't even know what pain was.
Yeah.
And so the fact that has been one of the songs that has carried me through the last 18 years.
Wow,
I'm just so like,
awesome.
So you can imagine my excitement now that I'm like, oh my goodness, like now we have you here with the people I love in our church that get to experience you. And it's just fun to re-meet you. But you have a son.
I do.
Justice?
I do.
Is it? Okay, so tell us a little bit about Justice, and then I would love to hear your story leading up to where you are now too.
Justice is 15.
Is he here with you?
No.
Okay.
He goes to a pretty intense school. So if I were taking him on the road now, like I used to take him on the road, it would just be a complete nightmare. But he's 15 now. He's a freshman in high school.
Okay.
And I adopted him from birth. So I was in the delivery room with him years and years ago. Yeah, it was amazing. And that was just a whole journey with the Lord, God asking me to just go into a different realm of worship and obey him in a different part of worship. And yeah, he's great. He's a great kid. I mean, he's definitely a teenager.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
But
I have 2 boys, so I'm preparing for this.
Yeah. Well, I was telling somebody last night, you get those phone calls, and I got a phone call a couple weeks ago from the headmaster just wanting to prep me that he was fine, that he was okay, but that he had jumped off a balcony as a joke on a bunch of garbage bags, apparently full of old prom dresses. And he wanted to see if he could do that well.
Oh, sure, of course.
So he's all of 15 and he's great. He's just he's got a beautiful heart, beautiful little rap writer, loves to produce trap music. And
that's amazing.
Doesn't want much to do with the worship music, but loves trap music. And so.
Are you like, have you heard Worth It All? Do you know what this is?
Yeah, I don't impress him. None of my music impresses him.
Probably best, yeah.
So, which is great because sometimes none of my music impresses me either. When he starts playing his stuff, I'm like, yeah, yours is better. So.
Maybe there'll be a collab in the future.
One of these days, I hope so.
Oh my goodness. So you've got him. You love being a mom.
I do love being a mom. It is not easy being a single mom. That wasn't something that I knew it was going to be a challenge when the Lord asked me to do it. But it also opened up a whole way to encourage, talk to, and pray for single mothering because it's so predominant in our nation, especially with young men. And so I didn't realize that part of my journey would segue into just trying to encourage that.
Yeah. By living it.
By living it, yeah. And obviously, I mean, I'm a different kind of single mom because I came in by choice of obeying the Lord. But I meet up with a lot of single mothers who have 3, 4, 5 jobs, and their kids are in daycare, when they get off of school and they get, it's like, so I have it really good. Yeah. And the Lord's really taking care of us, but every day I realize what it is to be doing this with the Lord,
So how did this walk with God start? Because it's clearly deep. There are many layers to you and your walk.
I mean, I had a Christian family. Like I had a Pentecostal freak of nature for a father, not perfect by any stretch of the
delusional
imagination.
By faith.
And he was a broken man and had broken a lot of brokenness in his life from his own parents. He had kind of parents that didn't really have a relationship with God, kind of were in that religious kind of mentality. When my grandmother died at, I think, 91 years old, and she was still trying to do works to try to see if God would receive her or accept her, and had this holy supernatural encounter with the Holy Spirit where he walked into her room and told her that she was okay. And so she finally felt at 91 like she finally was okay with God. So, but he kind of coming out of that, he was the only child. And so when he got married, he had a rage issue. So I didn't see much of it. There were 6 of us. I'm 5 out of 6.
Okay, I'm 1 out of 6.
So the younger ones don't get a lot of the bad part of parenting, but he was dead by the time I was 9 of cancer, but was caught up in a faith movement and name it, claim it movement. So we were ticking and chanting and tonguing it. We would get into circles before school and we would be, encouraged to go out and evangelize our campuses for God and to bring in a report when we came home from school, how many people we evangelized. And we would just make up stories. Like we would all walk to the bus and say, "Are you doing this?" And we're like, "We're not doing this. Are you kidding me? We're not doing this." But we knew there was power in it. So there was obvious there was obviously something on his life.
Yeah.
He would preach and I could feel
So even
the
though
power
there
of
was
heaven.
extremities that you were having to live out, you still sensed there was something real.
There wasn't a shadow of a doubt that he was a passionate man of God who had problems.
Yeah. Yep.
And so I think in a lot of sense, when I look back at that, I see the grace to deal with your stuff. Yeah. And I think his going to the grave, asking for something that was never given to him in the natural. I mean, he, you don't talk about it when you're kids. You don't, I didn't grow up in a household where you're like, let's talk about our feelings. And so none of us talked about it till later on, but he took me aside at about 7.5, maybe 8, and said he had a really bad cold called cancer. But the Bible said if I prayed for him, God would heal him. So I just took him at his word. It's like when he talked and when he would disappear for days, and I'd find him sometimes because we caretook about 350 acres, never paid a dime for it because Dad would find these people. And just when we lived in campgrounds and we were like vagabonds. And he would go out into the woods for days with the Lord. And I remember coming upon him once with a horse. We had these horses that we would ride. So I'm six years old. I could saddle up a horse. Brothers taught me how to shoot a BB gun, shoot a 22. You locked it in your saddle and you just went off like Bonanza.
My word. Like Bonanza.
Yeah. And I was little Joe across the mountains, and he would find, I found him once, just buck naked in the dirt, down on his face, quoting chapters of Isaiah. So you see that as a little kid and you're thinking, my gosh, my dad's like a friend of God. Like, who does this? Yeah. And so I just took him at his word. And so when he died, it was almost like I didn't pray hard enough.
Yeah, oh sure.
So he didn't make it because something was wrong in me.
Oh man.
So it's what I call fractures. It's what I call childhood fractures that crack the windshield of our lives. And the enemy loves to just keep throwing rocks to keep those cracks shattering the windshield of your viewpoint. And that's why the enemy gets in. Yep. Usually the enemy will come in under the door of this small thing in your childhood or this large thing in your childhood that you can't talk about, you can't identify, you don't have any rhyme or reason for. You don't have
the frontal lobe developed to even process it. Right.
No, kids aren't resilient. Right. They just don't have the ability to understand how to cope with it. So they lock it in these storage units. And then usually at 35 to 45, it comes all cycling out in some form or another, whether it's addiction or something.
Yes, yeah.
So I think that those are my beginnings, but that in the back of the beautiful mind that I had as a kid, the Jesus place where Jesus really was resident.
It was genuine.
Yeah, that was
always
genuine
really there, right?
And that I remember feeling the Spirit of God. I remember watching people's legs grow. I remember signs and wonders. I remember those things. There was no way to say that they weren't there. And then my mother lived 10 years after that, and she was a church secretary and very well taken care of by the church. I mean, we were on welfare half the time, but she died of cancer too. So that was kind of a big blow of, well, maybe the Lord's really upset with me because I can't even keep a parent alive. And so that just led into this journey of not knowing what to say. And so I acted. I was an actress and I was going to go and be this big actress and because I was going to make so much money.
Like Broadway movies?
Broadway. I mean, I sang totally different.
I'm sure by that time you knew you had a killer voice.
No.
Oh, you didn't?
I didn't.
You didn't?
I never sang. I never sang like that.
You never sang like Les Mis or I guess that was before Hamilton.
Okay. Yeah, so it was always like, there is no business like show. There was nothing intimate. There was nothing. There was no model for that in church.
Yes.
And so for me, it was all acting and it was all, this is a way to escape
That was
poverty.
the creative outlet at the time.
Yeah.
Yep.
Not even knowing that God was giving me the mercy of surviving what I couldn't even comprehend. But I remember the day, I think my mom was pretty sick. And when he just said, I don't want you to act anymore, because I'd won every award I could get my hands on. I was, voted most likely to win an Oscar or a Tony. The Lord said, stop acting. Because what I would do is my 14-month older sister was tall and thin and really Marsha Brady pretty.
Oh, yeah.
And she
so
asked,
10.
Yeah. And so she asked for piano lessons.
Oh.
And I was like, if she's tall and thin and pretty and she plays the piano, that's not going to be good.
I see where this
I
is
can
going.
one-up her on talent. She's not as talented as I am.
Yeah.
So I said, I want piano lessons too, just to spite her. And so she wanted to play by the book. I didn't want to play by the book.
Yeah.
So she wanted to do whatever the piano teacher told her to do. And
you wanted to create.
I brought in Nadia's theme from The Young and the Restless and a theme from the Ice Castles. And I said, that's what I'm going to play. So I became the dramatic, I'm going to one-up you in piano. And it was practicing, cutting my fingernails so they bled, nobody's home, metronome ticking back and forth, and jumping around on the piano trying to do this stupid practicing because now I'm locked into these horrifying 30-hour-minute rehearsals just so that I can get to the piano teacher and accomplish Lavender Blue Dilly Dilly right. And the Holy Spirit showed up. And I felt this being.
This is after both parents are gone?
No.
Or just
this
dad?
This is at 11, after my dad.
Just dad, okay.
And I felt this being come up from behind me.
While playing the piano?
While running Hannon up and down and I'd hit a chord that was unfamiliar to me. And I felt this being behind me. And it was almost as if these arms had come around my front and pulled me back against like a leaning post. And I just started weeping. And of course, you're 11, 12, you don't understand what's happening. But all I wanted was to find that place again. So I would wait for nobody to be home, rush back to the piano, and try to just put my fingers. And then I started writing letters to the Lord on the piano. But that was all private. Nobody knew I did that.
Right.
And then Mom was a church secretary, so I'd have the bus drop me off at the Baptist church and go into the sanctuary with the grand piano. And the only way that you lit the sanctuary was the stained glass windows on the side and the light coming in. And I'd play for 2 hours before she got off work and we drove home. And I would just, dear God, this is how I feel. How come you've abandoned me? And I didn't know I was worshiping.
You felt
it, and
you were trying to feel it again.
I could feel it again and again and again, which is funny because sometimes.
So you could access it again and again.
Oh, he would just.
On the piano?
I could feel him come.
Every time?
Without really understanding that it was him that was coming.
Yeah, of course, right.
It was just this thing that all of a sudden I could feel emotion.
Yeah.
I could feel.
Or I'm guessing you have been locked up.
Locked up.
Because what you were saying about your, oh my goodness.
And so I started writing down my lyrics and all these things, but never, ever showing them to anybody. Heaven forbid. You never did that.
Yeah.
My oldest sister was like a guitar playing master and Joni Baez sounding phenomenon. Taught herself how to play all these instruments. She wanted the record label. That was nothing I'd even thought about.
Yeah.
I was going to be an actress.
Yeah.
So I was a secret closet worshiper. And
you didn't even know it. And you didn't even know what it was.
So when the Lord said, stop acting because you hate who you are when you act. That's why you want to be somebody else in character. And I was like, really? He's like, yeah, but when you sing, I get all that. Can you just start singing? So of course
he got the real you.
He got the presence. He got the humility of it. It wasn't for something else. But then when you're doing that, you don't know how to do that. All you know is how to do this.
Oh, sure, right.
So now you're like, now I've got to take this thing that he's saying is this way. And I have to put it into this category of what acting is because he wants me to do that instead of acting. So it was kind of like a season of oil and water not mixing and not realizing that performance and acting and worship are oil and water. They don't mix.
Right.
So trying to get the worship into the performance category was a long process for me.
Oh my goodness.
And once I got that down, it just kind of ruined it for me anyway. So I couldn't be a performer. Yeah.
When did it dawn? Like, when did you realize, oh, this is worship. This is God. This is presence.
Well, I think
this is intimacy. Helped. Okay, so it was just really as you grew in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. When I walked in the vineyard, I wasn't a worship leader.
No.
But I was watching them do what I was doing in the closet.
Right.
And when I first heard somebody do prophetic singing, I remember being in the bleachers. It was at this conference, and I started having this like almost this panic-driven moment because I was like, "That's what I do.
Right.
That's what I'm doing in the closet.
That's
like
what I've been doing for so many years." Right.
I didn't have a name for it.
You didn't have and I'm guessing there weren't many women.
No.
Was there any? There probably wasn't any. Yeah, I would guess zero.
No. Back then, I've gotten asked a lot, like, who mentored you? It's like, nobody. And I don't mean to say that.
Is that why you have such a heart for it?
Yes.
Mentorship
because, but the most important thing I did was I remember the conversation where I said, Lord, can you mentor? And he says, yeah, I mean, it's what I did with the disciples. Yeah. What do you need? Yeah. I was like, will you mentor me in worship so I know what it is and what it's not? And I'd have these full-blown conversations with him. And so I didn't know that while I was digging trenches, thinking, oh, I'm building myself a foundation. Mm-hmm. I was actually building other women foundations for houses they would make.
You were pioneering. You just didn't know it.
Yep. And I don't think, you'd have to be a really strong human being for the Lord to be like, hey, I just want you to know you're building a house you'll never live in. Many of us would be like, I'm not going through all this work if it's not going to benefit me somehow. So he never let on that. Mm-hmm. But when it became apparent, I was so far in, I was like, okay, we'll keep digging.
You were in too deep.
I was way in too deep.
You were in so deep.
And then you all of a sudden, you arrive at a location to do a night of worship, and you got this kid named Carrie Job doing your BGVs, and you realize that she's like, you're her everything, but you don't know you're actually building her house.
You are.
And that's actually quite beautiful when you're sitting down with these incredibly beautifully gifted.
It's got to pay off decades later.
It pays off.
Oh, and
I mean, it's, the hard part, if you were looking at the hard part again, when you go back to, do you want a royalty check or do you want to raise the dead?
Yep.
You don't get the glory from it. You may never get remembered for it. They're going to get all the accolades, and they're going to get the home is paid for and the car is paid for 100%. And all those things. And that was always something I was like, will it ever be easy? Because it's always felt like an uphill climb. And I do feel like the Lord's like, don't ever let that be the focus of your vision, but always know that you have the provider. You have the one that's always going to come through. So I've actually seen God come through in ways that they've never needed him to come through for.
Because you paved the way.
Because I paved the way.
Dustin, my husband, who you'll meet tonight, he is a mentor, and his name is Jude. And he says, all I want is my life to be a platform for someone else to stand on. It's like, that is what I'm called to do. Yeah. It is what you're talking about, digging. I want to dig trenches so it's not this hard for girls.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I had, who knows why, but I was graced for it.
Yeah.
So I'm going to dig it so that these sweet girls at Bethel and these awesome girls at YWAM School of Worship 18 years ago, and whoever else it is, don't have to, not that they're not going to have uphill battles. Yeah. We all know those are there regardless, but like there will be some graces they have.
Yeah.
Because you went ahead and...
Yeah, and they're fighting things I didn't have to fight.
Sure.
So, a lot of the counseling or the encouraging that I do on a weekly basis with some of them, they're in things that I never, it wasn't because we didn't have CCLI. I mean, CCLI started, I think, in the Vineyard where a couple guys got together and were like, we think worship leaders aren't paid.
Yeah.
Why don't we give them a royalty?
Yeah.
And then it became something that's like, got to get on those charts, got to get your song on those charts.
Just flip so quickly.
And I just didn't want, I'm so glad that it's like, well, whatever.
Yeah.
But
so this brings me to one of the questions I wanted to ask you, because you wrote Defender, right? Okay. So this morning, we were having a staff meeting and we were talking, and he had told our staff that, just some of the many of them know you, but many of them are like 21, 20, and they know you through Bethel and all of that, but they don't know the legacy. Yeah. They don't know the 18 years ago in Conan type. And he's like, she wrote Defender, and there was like a gasp. And so this is my question is, and this goes back to what you were saying, like, does it ever bother you that so-and-so sang Defender?
No.
I knew that would be your answer. And I want to know,
No.
and I want to know how you got to that place, because I knew that would be your answer, that it doesn't bother you, that the upper room got credit for Defender, or so-and-so got credit for Defender, or Defender was has been my favorite song for the last 2 years. Right.
Yeah.
And so many people cover it. So many people. And I know clearly you don't care about the money, but do you ever care about the credit? And if you don't, how did you get to that place? Because I feel like that is very rare in a culture that is perpetuated by, we want credit.
Yeah. I don't know if I'm just different.
Okay.
I don't know if I just wasn't born with that. I think
ambition?
I don't have it.
Okay.
I don't.
It was never hard?
I think maybe in my 20s and 30s, maybe what was hard wasn't credit as much as acknowledgement that I had something to offer. But again, you're talking about, those were the days when my music would be bypassed. I mean, radio stations, we would do these songs and radio stations would say, literally, this is one of them. We can't play you on the radio because your voice scares people. You sound too much like Bonnie Raitt or Sheryl Crow. Oh, that's what would.
Well, they stood the test of time a lot more than I'm guessing whoever they were playing.
If I had gone into the secular industry with my type of
killed
voice, I probably would have been hugely successful. Yeah. But because I went into a line of where the demographic, there's a demographic in CCM or whatever. And that demographic is a certain age bracket woman. It's never a guy. It's an age bracket of woman. She's got a minivan. She has soccer balls in the back. And they actually call her Becky. She's fictitious, but they call her Becky. And you have to write for Becky because Becky wants...
Becky's
your demographic. And honestly, I was too John the Baptist-y to be like, I'm going to try to run Becky off the highway and throw her band on, because I was always wanting to sing about things Becky didn't want to sing about. Becky doesn't want to sing about cut the heads off my enemies
and bring it back.
Yeah, you can't give Becky any graphical things to sing about.
Give Becky
and
a
I was
nice
like,
future.
I'm too poetic. I'm never going to match up with Becky. If I went into the secular or the marketplace, no problem.
Yep.
But that's what I dealt with in my youth. So to try to want, it was more like being recognized for what I was bringing to the table.
Yes.
The fact that somebody would come to the table and look at one of my songs and be like, oh my gosh, I want one of these songs. I'd be like, oh my gosh, it's like a pie. It's like, have a piece of the pie. Are you kidding me? Go have the piece of pie. That to me was like the compliment in itself to be like, oh, you want to sing that? That's so great. That's so great. Because a lot of times in churches that you still go to, it's a staring contest.
Oh,
and I used to be like, why are you people? Why can't you people? Oh, it's my job to teach you how to worship. And then the Lord's like, no, that's not your job. Your job is just to worship. And if they don't want me by the way your posture is going after me, it's their loss. And so I don't have that grid in me that's like, oh gosh, Katie took Defender and put it on Jesus Culture, and that's doing better than my version. And Franny took it, and that's it. Because Katie's somebody I absolutely adore.
Sure.
And Franny is my girl.
Right.
Upper Room, I couldn't be more in love with them.
Absolutely. So you're more than happy to do for someone else what nobody ever did for you.
Oh, in a heartbeat. But wasn't Jesus? Didn't Jesus teach the disciples everything they needed to know? And it wasn't like he walked around going, you'll never be me.
I love it.
If we're going to do this the way he's asked us to do this, we have to ask him for those things that need to settle in our hearts so that we can do it without needing all of that crud to validate us. Ugh. I used to be someone who needed the validation. And now my response is, I don't care if you don't like me. I know that when I enter a room, anywhere I go, Jesus grabs his chest and he gasps because I'm there. And whether you do or not, doesn't make any difference to me. And that is freedom. When you finally come to that place where you're like, I don't need your validation. I already got my validation. And it does something to you. Yeah. And it opens doors for you and creates a way for you, much like finally forgiving somebody opens up this vat. And once you're past that place, you turn on, you're like, why did I choose to stay there for 2 years when I could have gotten that? And so I think it's the biggest secret. It's almost like the best kept secret, except that people should be telling it all over the place.
All over the place.
If you deal with your stuff, there's actually freedom attached to that. And you don't have to deal with the stuff that you ever dealt with before. Why is it in the church we live so bound? Like I say to my kids all the time, my creative kids, look, when God created the universe, he wasn't on Prozac. He wasn't like, I'm so miserable with my life that I've got to do art and let my art speak for itself. That's the excuse that we use to stay in our misery to find the mercy of God. And it's really beautiful that God gives us that mercy, but God didn't need to create in order to get through his sadness over Lucifer leaving. You know what I'm saying?
With Judas and the Lucifer.
Yes, it's like,
just
come
rough
on.
times.
He was like, I got an idea. I'm about to do something. I'm going to start speaking. And he just started talking, and light and dark and planets separate. And for 5 days, he does this beautiful thing. And then he puts man in the middle of it and says, all this I made for you. Now here's the one thing I'm giving you choice. Do you want to choose me or not? Because if you choose me, the world is your oyster. But if you don't choose me, oh God, your uphill climb is going to get really bad. And we chose the uphill climb. Yeah, we did. So when you flip that over and you start actually saying, I'm not doing this anymore. Life is going to be an uphill climb. But my spirituality is going to be like, I want to choose you. So how do I choose you in this? That person actually really hurt my feelings. How do I choose you? I just ask God. It's like, I don't know if this will tick off some of your listeners, but
you go right ahead. You just say, I am
during
so
the
tracking.
election,
We are tracking.
Boys,
Oh yeah.
I felt like the Lord was like, why are you in an upheaval? I was like, what do you mean? He's like, why are you so worried? Why are you so worried about this? I'm like, because the world is ending. Like, look at this. There's just so much stuff. And it's this and it's that. And we feel like we have to protect. And we feel like we have to defend God. And we feel like we have to stand up and be like, we need to come back to the foundations of the earth and blah, 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 blah. And the Lord's like, just stop all that. And just, I know it. I know who's going to win. Just ask me who's going to win. Ask me what's going to happen. Because I'll give you the nations. I'll teach you how to pray for these things. And so I just started saying, oh gosh, you mean I can ask you things and you'll tell me? So when stuff happens and I feel like, oof, that doesn't feel right. Hey, Lord, what is that about? Now the Lord will just say, well, the reason that person responded like that is because of this and that. So don't blame them. Just love them. Don't hold them accountable because nobody's getting to hold it's not your job to hold them accountable. That's their pastors. But that's what you're dealing with. So there've been moments when you come into encounter with people and you're like, wow, that was super mean. Or why were they super mean? Why was that super mean there? Because they're having an affair. And they're dealing with something else. Okay, so that's not my deal. No, but can you do me a favor? Will you really pray for them? Yes. How do you want me to pray for them? Place where you can do that. And it's like, because all of a sudden you separate yourself from, I don't know why that person said that to me. God, that made me so mad why they said, why do they feel like they have to do that? I don't understand why they just don't think I'm worthy to be on the stage. And then we go down these rabbit trails where we're like, they never asked me to sing a song and they never asked me to be in leadership and they don't like me and they don't, it's just like, just cut to the chase. Ask the Lord. And sometimes the Lord's like, well, it isn't their problem. It's yours. You have a rejection issue you need to deal with. And then deal with the rejection issue. Deal with it. Get through the stuff. And you progress. And all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, this is a beautiful place to create. I want to teach artists to create out of their freedom, not their bondage. And I think we'd change the world if we created out of our freedom.
So good.
Anyway, I'm all for Kanye West.
I am. Could not love him more. We buy out before Dustin will probably be in Kanye West gear tonight. So good. Question. So many of your songs seem to come from like pretty deep places. Correct me if I'm wrong. Places of pain.
Absolutely.
Darkness.
Absolutely.
Like real raw. Like ultra raw. And it's not that it's like soul bearing raw. I feel like And I heard a pastor say one time that everything meaningful, he was talking to other pastors just about like how they communicate. And he was saying like everything meaningful you will ever really say will come out of a place of pain. And you have to like lay on the cross, stripped naked and bleeding to like, that is where real, who you really are and what you've really been through and what you have to say, that's where it takes shape and life. And your songs resonate that thought with me. So questions like, how do you put together a song? Because I'm willing to bet you don't just like go to Starbucks and like, this sounds like a good Defender. Bring back the Head of My Enemies. Like I would imagine you're in pretty, like maybe even taking Defender because that's so popular right now. Like how was that birth? What was the process? I don't know if you're comfortable sharing a story or pain behind it, but what does it look like to like lay yourself bare like that, vocally, lyrically, to God, to the world, and write a song that has changed the masses?
Well, I don't think I've ever done anything else but
that.
So so I think my music, if you follow it, you're never going to get anything but raw and real, which is why I've been chastised for it, or why I haven't been played, or why I haven't made what other people make in it, because it's not the congregational, typical, sweet, kind thing that somebody made a rule about that everybody wants. I was in disobedience in some of my journey and some of my walk. I wasn't obeying the Lord in some areas. And then there were other areas where life hit me. My parents died of cancer. How do you deal with that as a kid? And what are those fractures, those chips in your windshield that we were talking about before? They all of a sudden manifest. The enemy's not okay with just a rock on the windshield. He actually wants a root to grow a tree, to grow a limb, to grow a branch. And the Bible's very clear. You can't just cut the branch. You got to cut to the root. But the way sometimes we're raised, the way that our psyche is, the way that we've been taught how to go after things, or if religion is stuck in our foundational stuff, we're crawling up actions and not, or we're crawling up laws and we're not, and there's all of this stuff that facilitates where we're stuck or how we proceed. But for me, I've always wanted to have an honest cry where it wasn't hard to identify how to get there. Instead of, it's like, stop beating around the bush, just tell them what you think. You know, H.G. Spafford said it really well. You know, when peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrow like sea billows roll, whatever my lot thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul. He, you know, the language of the day was a little bit different than the language of our day. But if I were H.G. Spafford, having just lost my family, standing on the bow of a ship, passing over the waters where my family had just died, how would I say it? You go before I know. You've even gone to win my war, and you've come back with the head of my enemies. That's how I would say it today. So it's that honest conversation that I cannot not be honest with the Lord. And Defender came with conversation with the Lord saying, pull JP Gentile out and bring him in. He's a drummer from Bethel. Fly him to Dallas and songwrite with him. And I had been talking to him as a mother and just encouraging him. And there'd be moments when the Lord would wake me up in the morning and say, I need you to call JP and I need you to tell him this and I need you to walk him through this and I need you to encourage him in this. So I'd had that relationship with him. We'd had that track record for a couple years. So I said, hey, I want you to come in. I'm going to write for this record and I want you to be, in fact, the Lord was specific. He was to play drums on the record as well. So I pulled him in and we started to converse. And the first song we wrote was this really beautiful children's lullaby. And he actually brought the beginnings of Defender to the table in his wrestle, in his journey with the Lord. And what happened at that table was he had brought in the beginnings of Defender, and the ending of Defender, the bridge in Defender, was a completely other song that 24 hours later, he said, hey, there's another song that I have that I started. And he started to sing the melodies of that. And I was like, that's the bridge to this song. So So I almost facilitated the beginning stages of something. And if JP hadn't been there to be the puzzle piece to fit into my journey, where our journeys are very different.
Yes.
But when you look at each other from across the room and you're like, how did that make you feel? It made me feel like this. It made me feel like this too. But the stories are totally different. But did you need a defender in that? Yeah, it's like he walked on the field, cut the head off of Goliath, and put his foot on the back of Goliath, put the head in the air and said, it's over. And that's what I felt out of that season of betrayal. So it was coming out for me, that was the finality. Amazing. It had already been the finality, but it was almost like Deborah's song or Mary's song. Yes. It was like there was a melody that had to come out of that. And there were 2 songs on that record that were my melody out of that. And Defender was one and Carry Me was the other. And that was like my finality of saying on the battlefield, we're done. Like this is done. I never have to ever go back to this.
The water is rushing under the bridge.
I love that it becomes the anthem of other people because it may not be their story.
Yes.
But the defense of God had to be their story. I have a couple that's in a court battle right now. And that's a song for them in a literal court battle, the defense of God. And you've got, other people that have just these crazy, wild stories that you're like, whoa.
You hear about it.
I'd never think that God would have used that song for that or for this or for that. But that's the beauty of melodic interchange is that God will take it.
1,000 different stories, and it will resonate.
Fully, absolutely.
And we'll all think you wrote it just for us.
Yeah.
I was sure you wrote it just for me.
Yeah. And I think that's what's so beautiful about artistic impression is that, those are things that will last forever. You could stand in front of a painting was painted 200 years ago and still be stunned by its artistry. What else can do that? Can man do that? Can you stand in front of a man and be so stunned by what a man has done, like you can the arts or an open sky. So for me, that's kind of the
amazing
beauty of art.
Do you have a favorite song? I'll wrap up here soon. That you've written? Do you have one of your favorites?
I think it's seasonal. Like right now, there's a song, we'll actually sing it tonight, but that's on this new record that's called Landslide. I think everybody who is in my era may think I'm covering Stevie Nicks'. You guys probably don't even know who Stevie Nicks is.
I love
these young guys. But that's my favorite right now.
Okay.
Because what I love to do is find phrasing that speaks to where I want or I feel like the Lord is coming. And when you think about making God's love a natural disaster, it's probably not that Becky's way. Becky won't be singing it, but that's probably my favorite new song right now. But Defender is there's a song on the record called Never Lost and Defender. Those are those are of my own. I've got ones that I love from other people.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. Next question, and I only have a couple more, but I want you to speak to, as somebody who's been in worship for, how many years have you been doing this?
Well, I recorded my first record in 97.
Okay, so that's the year I graduated. So 25, 30 years.
Almost 30 years.
So somebody you have been a worship pastor. You've also traveled on the road. You've dealt with every kind of worship. I'm guessing band imaginable. You've dealt with the highest maintenance, the lowest maintenance. I'm guessing you've been through every denomination possible. Yeah. You have seen the gamut of it all. And I would just love to hear your thoughts on anybody who kind of not even, whether it's our worship leader who you're going to be with after this. He is amazing and absolutely incredible. But I hear a lot like God can't move within a 90-minute service. Like you got to give him the 5 hours, and we can't break through in worship until as somebody who has lived this way more than anybody saying that God needs 5 hours to impact, what would you just say to somebody who can be a little critical? And I don't have a person in mind. I just know that there's kind of a thought out there that God doesn't move unless we give him till 1 a.m. type of thing.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's all bogus, to be really honest with you.
Okay.
And this is why.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, I was on staff at Gateway for 7 years, and I think the clock of their service is an hour and 15.
Okay, yeah.
So sometimes it was 14 minutes of worship. Sometimes it was 18.
Yep.
On a Sunday that we were really partying, it was maybe 21 or 22. But if anything had to be cut, worship is usually the thing that's cut.
Sure.
I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, but I do understand it from the perspective of being on staff of a massive mega church. And your responsibility is that you've told people you're doing 5 services. Because you told people that you need to clear that parking lot. So it's stewarding those parameters that you've set in place, and all of those kids that are in the kids department and all of those workers. You're stewarding everybody's heart in that manner. So you need to get that thing done in an hour and 15 minutes. To lock God into a time frame. This is a God who says you do not know the time, the day, or the hour.
Right.
Of his coming or returning. So if we have a God that says you don't have any clue.
You don't even know what time.
And he's never said stay in worship for 24 hours. He's never made that. There's nowhere in scripture that I can find where he's like,
or he's given us the time limit.
Yeah, he's given this, or saying I'm not coming unless you do it this way. Now, if you go back to the Old Testament, you'll see God say, this is how I want you to build a tabernacle.
Yes.
Don't use that wood. Use only this wood.
Yeah.
Don't put that, don't put that amount of frankincense on the altar with that amount of galbanum. Do it like this. He's a God of order. But all that order was put into the Son. And so the Son made a way for us to enter in by the blood. And there's not like this weird time frame attached to it. So I get that question a lot. My pastor doesn't, see the value of worship. And so we've got 15 minutes of worship. How in the world can we find God in 15 minutes? And my response or rebuttal has always been,
what?
I can find God in 30 seconds. If you're having a hard time in 15 minutes, this isn't a problem for the Lord. It's a problem for you. And so part of that teaches us, why are we putting limitations? This is most of the time, not all the time.
Right, sure,
but most of the time it's, I don't get to shine if I'm only getting 15 minutes. Every step, all the rehearsal that we've done with our band and our tracks, we don't get to wow the people. If you only give us this amount of time. We don't get to do the prophetic song. We don't get to go there. We don't get to go there. We don't get to do the things we love to do where we feel the presence of the Lord. A lot of times it's pride. It's a pride issue. And sometimes it's just, it really is about what leadership is and submission. So a lot of people that I've talked to, it's like, can I ask a question? Where is your submission to your leader? If you're so upset with your leader about what your leader says is long enough or not long enough, how are you submitting to authority? Because maybe this isn't about the time limitations. Maybe it's really about God showing you how to submit to authority.
Okay, so can I dig into one thing you've said? I promise I'm going to be quick, but you're just, I just feel like I have like a gold mine here. I feel like I'm in like Fort Knox. Okay, so for somebody who doesn't know that they can do it in 30 seconds, can you break down? I know it's not a pathology. I know it can't be A, B, and C because there's a heart thing in play here. So I'm not looking for an A, B, and C, but what gives you the confidence that I can walk into, you're about to go on our stage tonight and sing over thousands of people and you're going to be able to do it within 30 seconds. I guess the better question would be why? Why can you step up within 30 seconds? And is it confidence with God? Is it history?
I would think
it's
history.
Because it's not pride, because there's not an ounce of pride in you. Okay.
It's peace. It's like, I have no doubt that the moment, he's with me. So I have no doubt that he will be there. He's gone. The Bible says he's gone before us.
Yeah.
And so he's already been standing on that stage.
Yes.
And he's got whoever he needs to help him say, hey, Rita's going to be here in a few hours. And this is how she is. And we're not going to have to do this or do that. She's just going to want to find me.
Yes.
So we need to get this atmosphere ready because she wants to find me. So there's this kind of thing that I just don't go into it stressed out. It's like, If it's a train wreck, then let it be a train wreck because it has been a train wreck.
I guess that was the wrong term to use. I meant a train wreck in like a good way that like everybody's going to be wrecked.
Right. But there have been train wrecks.
Had there really?
Yeah. And it's like there are moments. That's how I learned how to get to the place that you're talking about.
Oh, okay.
It's like, when I first got my first worship team that I got to choose, the Lord said, nope, you can't choose that guitar player. I want you to choose that one. Lord, that one's horrifying. I know. Choose that guitar player. Choose that vocalist.
Right.
Oh my gosh, Lord, she is tone deaf. I'm not. She's going to make me look bad. They're going to make me look bad. And he's like, I know, but that's your team. Train your team. And I'm telling you, train wreck every Saturday night at 6:30. No. And every Saturday night, somebody would come up sobbing.
I was just about to say,
that's the most amazing worship I've ever heard in my life. And I was like, okay, so you're after a sound that the broken are listening to, not the sound that I'm trying to perfect. The Lord's like, that's right. And that's how you learn how to worship. So I'm not after the perfect sound that gets him in the room and all of a sudden we make this bed for God and then God can come and we
finally
fluff up the pillows and God can come in the throne.
Yeah.
I just know that he loves me enough that he's like, you don't have to fluff the pillows for me. I'm just going to come because I love you, kid. And that's who I serve. That's who I live for. That's who I've spent my life.
So the most
loving.
amazing worship moments in your life and the total train wrecks on Saturday nights at 6:30 all taught you the exact same thing.
That. And the best moments anyway are never these moments. These are great moments.
Right.
The best moments are 2 o'clock in the morning when I can't sleep. And I just walk into the room and sit down. Or 5 o'clock in the morning when I got a song going on and I just want to sit down and just do 10 minutes of phrasing to the Lord. Yeah. That's the best of the best of the best.
Really.
And that's when you feel him the most because you don't need to worry about what people are thinking.
So you don't have to worry about walking on any stage, no matter how big or how small, because
there's no reason to it. I mean, Gateway has these massive stages and I remember suffering stage fright when I'd gotten over that.
Yeah.
And there was one moment where I just was petrified. I was flipping out. And I couldn't remember lyrics. I was like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? What's happening? And the Lord's like, the spirit of performance is running rampant and clamp down on it. And I said, how? And he said, I'm walking out ahead of you. So before you're supposed to go out there, picture me walking out ahead of you and standing in the middle of the stage and literally silencing all of the chaos so that you could come up behind me and do it. And that was the best visual I'd ever had. And I did. I closed my eyes and that last thing rung out, 2 minutes before I went on, and I saw the Lord walk out there and I saw him silence the chaos. And I walked out and never had a problem. But maturity gets you to that place.
Yeah.
I would never expect a 21-year-old to walk out and be like, I'm not worried about this or I'm not worried about that.
Because they're going to be. So that's the power of mentorship. Somebody's got to tell them, like, Jesus has gone before you, and whether it's a train wreck in the best way.
That's not overnight.
Or the worst way.
I can't wave a magic wand and be like,
only.
this is how you'll be today.
If only.
It's a journey. You have to be willing to, I can't give you my cost.
No.
You have to walk the journey out yourself. I got here because I paid a high price for it. But if you want what I have, you have to ask the Lord for the things I've asked for and have the Lord take you down your own journey. I'm just here to say you can get there.
You can do it.
You can do it. Yeah, it's reachable. Doesn't make me perfect.
No, of course not. No.
I'm the most imperfect person, but at least I'm the kind of person that the Lord could say, oof, you screwed up on that one. Even with my kid. Like I've given him full reign, like tell me when I blow it.
Yeah.
And he'll wake me up and say, you blew it, go wake him up and tell him you blew it and tell him I had nothing to do with what you just said to him. Oh, wow. So I'm like, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Because he's fathering him.
Right.
So I'm going to sabotage the fathering of God if I go against what he's trying to instill in my kid. You know what I'm saying?
I do.
How easy do we do that?
Oh my goodness. I am just, okay. Yeah. One
more.
The
wells of wisdom, boys.
The wells of wisdom, boys. Oh my goodness. Okay. One more, because this comes up a lot, and I'm guessing with your mentorship program, you're hearing it a lot just in this generation, of which I consider myself a part, that I'm really actually not a millennial, but I'm on the tail end. What do you feel about the whole I don't feel it thing? as in, why should I lift my hands if I don't feel it? I don't want to be a fraud. I don't want to bow down to the Lord if I don't feel like bowing down to the Lord, because I don't want to be a hypocrite and a fraud. I want something real and authentic. And I'm not trying to prep you in any way. I genuinely want to know like what you feel about authenticity from the crowd, because you've kind of talked about it from the stage, like from the crowd, like sometimes people feeling the pressure to do this and this and this, where the Bible does say this and this at times, but am I clear with what I'm, What if I'm not feeling
it's that epidemic.
Yeah.
It's kind of
the feeling of it all.
First of all, I think I would just really, if there are millennials that are listening, like it's one of my favorite generations.
Love them. Same.
Because
wish I was
actually there's a creative expression on them.
Yes.
That they had to find because they stopped being able to say how they felt or they stopped being able to be received for who they are. When I look at a generation that the older generation has problems with, I always look back to the older generation and said, these are your kids. So what happened in you? Because a millennial would be like, if I had a child in my 20s, that would have been a millennial.
Yes. Yeah.
And so if a millennial has an issue with that, that's going to go back on me as the parent and say, what is it that you didn't believe that you actually instilled in your children that there was no encounter? And so, or in order to have an encounter, they'd have to feel a certain way. Something happened in my generation to get them to actually throw doubt on their children and tell their children, we're done thinking that it's this. It's why we've come to, I've got an incredible pastor in Nashville, and he brought up a few weeks ago in a sermon of his, I think it's a Franciscan monk. I don't know the guy's name, who has come out to say, famous monk, who's not monk, Catholic, whatever. No, I want to say Rolf is his name, but I don't know.
Okay.
But he's a famous Catholic guy. And he's come out to say, we don't need the blood of Jesus, because the generation doesn't like the fact that God had his son go to the cross. And that's a mean God if he had his son go to the cross. And so let's wipe out the cross.
Let's just obliterate
so that we don't make God a mean God. Right. And so it's adapting what we're uncomfortable with, because we don't want to even find the ability to say, it's choice. It's this choice thing. And I think for millennials, it's that choice thing. It's that, well, you can either say yes or you can say no. But if you want to do what you want to do, let's just not bring God into it. God's not okay with sin.
No.
If you want to be okay with sin, then that's your prerogative, but leave God out of it. And that incenses people, because the conviction that everybody's born with has the thing, the DNA in them of God in everybody that's born, doesn't want somebody to tell them they can't do what they want to do. But it isn't somebody telling them that. It's their own conviction saying, you want to prove to everybody that this is okay with God, because you yourself aren't okay with it. And you know you're not okay with it. So you have
the
to
justification.
So it's this confusing generation. It's confusing a generation to say, well, I don't. If it's not authentic, then it's not something for me. And because it's not served the way I want it served, because it's not brought to me the way I want it brought to me, and because it doesn't fit with my psyche, it doesn't fit with my personality or my character, then I just don't want it. And I think that just is like, I've talked to a lot of these guys,
I would imagine.
and I'm like, hey, you're brilliant, you're beautiful, you're amazing, you're so gifted and talented, but that's a line of bull crap. And here's why.
Why?
What? It's like asking them, what do you burn for then? What makes you burn?
Right.
And that catches people off, especially guys, because guys are like, what do you mean by that? What do you leave in the atmosphere then? Question? Confusion?
Unbelief?
Like, what are you leaving in the atmosphere? I want to leave what I burn with in the atmosphere. Yep. And I burn with courage. So I know that my attack is going to be discouragement, because what I burn for is courage. Because the enemy will always go at the opposite.
Yeah, of course.
So I think a lot of the confusion is that when they don't know who they are, it's because they have no idea what oil they carry. Yeah. And because they've questioned the oil that they carry, they have to be told or feel something in order to actually do it, because their authenticity of experience isn't part of their palate anymore. You know, we know what a well-roasted coffee bean tastes like. So we don't go to those other coffee beans anymore, because we know the authenticity of that coffee bean. So every other coffee bean is not any good now, because those coffee, that kind of a thing. It's like, so you go in that, but they've had the authenticity of that. Why? These are things I question. I'm like, have you ever tasted coffee? Why do you like coffee? Because I've tasted it. Have you ever tasted the presence of God? Because if you had, you would never leave it. Well, yeah, I've been in church, and all of a sudden it's church leaders and blah, blah, blah. I said, oh, so the bad taste in your mouth that left you not wanting authenticity and the presence is because you had a really bad season with the pastor. So what ended up happening? Well, it was like, and then they go into these things, and all of a sudden you hear about horrifying abuses. And then that goes back into, childhood trauma and all this stuff. And you're like, okay. So this really isn't about not wanting to raise your hands in church because you can't find authenticity. This is about the fact that you're so empty and you're so misled.
You have nothing to burn with.
You don't burn for anything but yourself. And you've started reading the books that say you're your own self-God.
Yeah.
And so you've trying to find your way out of the hole you've been placed in. And it's kind of that thing of Joseph being thrown down a pit.
Yeah.
And life can throw us down a pit, but whoever gets you out of the pit, you have the ability to either be in prison and still be gifted and still try to use what God's given you, or just blend in with the cell and just be angry because you're in a cell and never get to Pharaoh's house and never get to see your family again and never get to those things.
To save all of Egypt and all of y'all.
So it's like most of these kids felt like they've been thrown down into a ditch, and whatever got them out of the ditch was a self-help guide, was a really bad false teacher, was a really bad experience. And so a lot of them are like, oh, well, screw the church.
Right.
The church doesn't have anything to offer me. It's like, no, the building won't.
No.
Sometimes the buildings can be pretty, but if you're looking for a building to offer you, the pastors are totally imperfect. Right. Have you ever had an encounter with God? And that's why I always go back to
you. Go back to the encounter.
Yeah. It's like, that's why I always go back to, have you ever had coffee? Do you love coffee? Love coffee. Do you like fancy coffee? Why? Oh, because the way they roast the beans, the way they do this, the way they do that. And you can actually get them to explain why they feel the way they will just by...
They can explain the presence of God almost.
Yeah. It's like,
as they describe.
So if you'd never tasted that bean, you'd just be buying Starbucks all the time, right?
Good.
Well, that's what you've done. You've bought into this mechanical religious thing that tells you that you can't have an experience. But you've lied to yourself and said you can't have an experience. I know you can, because the way you talk about coffee
yes,
is a spiritual experience.
Yes. And you could say, I could walk on stage in 30 seconds and find God.
Yeah. Justice doesn't have ceilings. But I'm not going to tell justice, this is what the Lord told me you're going to become.
Yes.
This is what God said to me. I can say, hey, the Lord shared with me some encouraging things for you. He just says he loves you. But if I put on him, just as, this is how I talk to the Lord. You need to start talking to the Lord like this.
Yep.
I do say to him, I just want you to read your Bible every night before. Don't look at your device. Put down your phone, read a scripture. And just ask the Lord to talk to you how he talks to you through scripture. Yep. Don't try to talk to him like I talk to him. You won't have my relationship with him. Talk to me the way you want to talk to him. You find your own language.
You're leading while also fostering his own identity with God.
But how much of the institution of church has raised a generation to think if they don't do that and they don't do that and they don't do that and they don't do that, they fall short with the Lord and now they're just screw ups.
And then they walk in full of shame, which that's That's a
so it'd be horrible for me to be like, Justice, you know you're going to be a worship leader. The Lord's already told me you're going to be a worship leader. I never I've purposely never asked the Lord what he's going to do.
Yeah.
I just asked the Lord if he's going to be okay, so that I don't muck up or ruin his destiny by making him be what I think God's told me he's going to be. Because then he hears God through me.
Yes.
I want him to.
You want to foster his
mimic.
own. Right.
Yeah, but he's got to hear the Lord for himself. And God's going to speak to him in a way he's never going to speak to me.
Yep.
But if all he's like, well, my mom said the Lord told her that blah, 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 blah. It's like, then he's going to be like, I guess, I don't know. The Lord doesn't talk to me like he talks to my mom.
Yeah.
But I guess
therefore God must not.
God must not love me because he didn't talk to me the way he talks to my mom. No, stop all that.
Yep.
Just ask the Lord to talk to you the way you want to be talked to.
Yep.
And he's a big enough God that he'll do it.
Yep.
So I don't know if that answered your question.
It does. I love it. And I'm excited.
I love millennials though. And what they call them, the Xers.
I'm an Xer, I think. Yeah, I'm an Xer.
Well, X is my kids' generation.
Okay.
Right? Is it X or Z?
It's Z. It's millennial Z and then X. Yeah. So I don't. I love them too, though, and I have a heart for them because I can hear where they're coming from with these questions of just wanting to have something authentic and real with God.
Yeah.
I get it, but I also know that God says, "Come in, lift your hands, and give me praise, and watch what I can do." And it's just, man. This has been so good. Thank you, Rita.
You're welcome.
Last question.
Yeah.
Has it been worth it?
Yeah.
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 You say it really has? All the costs?
All the costs. I would never, if God came and said, hey, how about we keep your mom alive and your dad alive and we go back and do this all, I would say absolutely not. Don't do it. Because no song would have ever been written.
Yeah.
No, it set the course for me to find the Lord the way I found the Lord. I would have never adopted Justice, so I would never have do it all again. This is the best life I'm living right now.
Worth it all.
Yeah, it's worth it all.
Thank you so much. You are awesome. Oh my goodness. I'm so grateful.
Yeah.